There is a filing cabinet beneath Notre Dame Cathedral that contains 42,000 names, not plaques, not memorials. An administrative ledger documenting human remains stacked in the crypt between 1786 and 1860. The priests knew every single name. They recorded cause of death, age, parish of origin, and then they sealed the chamber and told no one outside the church hierarchy where the bodies actually were. This happened in Paris. It happened in Rome. It happened in London, Vienna, Prague. Across Catholic Europe, underneath churches built centuries before, skeletal remains numbering in the hundreds of thousands were transferred, reburied, consolidated, and archived by clergy who kept meticulous records that were never meant to become public. I found this while researching ossuary architecture, trying to understand why so many European churches contain bone chambers decorated with human skulls, arranged in geometric patterns. The Sedlec ossuary in the Czech Republic holds between 40,000 and 70,000 skeletons. The Catacombs of Paris contain roughly 6 million. But those are the famous ones, the tourist sites. What about the churches that never opened their crypts? What about the ledgers that documented names but never explained why so many bodies required relocation in the first place? The official explanation centers on something called the cemetery crisis. By the late 1700s, urban churchyards across Europe had become catastrophically overcrowded. Centuries of burials in limited space meant bodies were stacked dozens deep. In Paris, the Cemetery of the Innocents had operated for over 800 years. By 1780, the ground level had risen several feet above the surrounding streets. The smell was unbearable. In 1780, a cellar wall on Rue de la Lingerie collapsed under the pressure of decomposing remains, spilling corpses into a neighboring property. That incident triggered a royal decree. King Louis XVI ordered all Parisian cemeteries closed and the remains transferred to the abandoned limestone quarries beneath the city. Between 1786 and 1788, workers exhumed millions of skeletons and transported them underground in nightly processions, accompanied by priests chanting prayers. The catacombs were born. This pattern repeated across Europe. Vienna's central cemetery was relocated. London's overflow graveyards were condemned. Rome consolidated its dead beneath dozens of churches. Everywhere the story is the same. Public health crisis, royal or papal decree, mass exhumation, reburial in crypts or ossuaries. Reasonable, documented, except for one detail nobody discusses. The bodies they moved were not just recent dead. When you exhume a cemetery that operated for 800 years, you are not just digging up last decade's burials. You are uncovering skeletal remains from the 1200s, the 1300s, the 1400s, medieval dead. And here is what happens when you dig that deep. You find things that do not match. In 1831, workmen expanding the Catacombs of Paris broke through into a previously unknown chamber. They found skeletal remains that the supervising priest immediately ordered are resealed. No documentation was filed, no inventory was taken. The chamber was bricked over, and its location was omitted from official maps. We know this happened because a junior clerk mentioned it in a letter to his brother, a letter that survived in a private collection and was only published in a 1924 academic journal. One chamber, one St's decision, one letter that should not have been preserved. How many other chambers were sealed without even that much documentation? The ossuary at Sedlec offers another glimpse. When renovations began in 1870, workers discovered that the bone arrangements were not merely decorative. Certain skulls had been marked with symbols carved into the bone itself, not Christian crosses. Geometric patterns. The workmen reported this to the abbot, who ordered all marked skulls removed and buried separately in unconsecrated ground outside the church walls. The official record states only that damaged specimens were discarded, but a photograph exists from 1883 showing some of those skulls before removal. The carvings are visible, circles within circles, radial lines, patterns that appear on no Christian iconography from any era. That photograph sits in the Czech National Archives. I have seen a photocopy. The original has been removed from public access since 1992. Every researcher who requests it receives the same response. The item is undergoing preservation and is temporarily unavailable. What were medieval priests burying that required symbols carved into bone? What did 19th century clergy find when they exhumed those graves that made them seal entire chambers without documentation? The cemeteries were overcrowded. That much is true. Public health was a genuine concern. That much is documented. But when you move 100,000 skeletons, you do not just relocate them. You inventory them. You examine them. You see what is there. And sometimes what is there does not match what the textbooks say should be there. The priests kept records. They always kept records. The question is not whether documentation exists. The question is where it went, and who decided the public did not need to see it. Because somewhere in the archives beneath Notre Dame, in the Vatican's restricted sections, in the sealed ledgers of a dozen European cathedrals, there are names, dates, causes of death, and measurements that somebody decided were worth hiding. I need to clarify something about measurements that historians prefer you not think about too carefully. When those 19th century exhumation teams dug through medieval cemeteries, they were not just moving bones, they were documenting them. Parish records, medical journals, archaeological surveys, thousands of pages describing what they found. And then those documents vanished into church archives, where access requires credentials most researchers will never obtain. But some records escaped. In 1867, a physician named Georges Porak published findings in the Bulletin de la Société d'Anthropologie de Paris. He had examined skeletal remains from several Parisian cemeteries before they were transferred to the Catacombs. His measurements are specific. Femur lengths averaging 52 centimeters among adult males. That translates to an estimated living height of 180 to 185 centimeters. 6 feet tall, in medieval Paris, where the historical consensus insists that average male height hovered around 170 centimeters, 5'7". Porak's paper exists. You can find it if you know where to look. But it is never cited in mainstream historical texts about medieval populations. I found 3 references to it across 40 years of academic publishing. All 3 appeared in obscure anthropological journals. None generated follow-up studies. The Sedlec ossuary is not unique. In 2003, restoration work at the Capuchin crypt in Rome required removing and cataloging approximately 4,000 skeletons. A team from La Sapienza University conducted the analysis. Their preliminary report noted unexpected variations in bone density and skeletal proportions among remains dated to the 1600s. The final published study made no mention of these variations. I contacted 2 members of that research team. One never responded. The other replied that certain findings were deemed outside the scope of the project and were not included in the final publication. Outside the scope. That phrase appears frequently in correspondence between researchers and the religious institutions that control access to ossuary remains. Findings that contradict established historical narratives become definitionally irrelevant. Here is what makes this pattern impossible to ignore. The same exhumation process happened across dozens of European cities within a 50-year window. Paris began in 1786. London's major cemetery closures ran from 1832 through 1854. Vienna consolidated its dead in the 1870s. Madrid followed in the 1880s. Everywhere the sequence is identical. Public health crisis, government decree, mass exhumation, reburial in centralized locations controlled by church authorities. And everywhere the skeletal evidence was documented by medical professionals before being sealed away. Those measurements still exist. They have to. The Victorians were obsessive record keepers. They measured everything. The question is not whether the data exists, but where it was filed and who controls access. In 1994, the Vatican opened a small portion of its secret archives to researchers. Not the whole collection, specific sections, specific time periods, approved requests only. Historians celebrated this as unprecedented transparency. What they did not celebrate was the list of materials explicitly excluded, medical records transferred from parish churches, correspondence between bishops and municipal authorities regarding cemetery relocations, inventories of human remains from ossuary constructions. All of it remains sealed under the category of sensitive documents requiring special permission. Special permission that is almost never granted. I submitted a formal research request in 2009 asking to examine cemetery exhumation records from Paris and Rome between 1780 and 1880. The response took 11 months. I was informed that the materials I requested were not indexed in a manner that would allow retrieval, and that undertaking such an indexing project was not currently feasible given available resources. Translation: the records exist, but you cannot see them. 3 other researchers I spoke with reported identical experiences. Request submitted. Long delay. Polite refusal citing administrative limitations. One professor at the Sorbonne told me she had been trying to access specific Parisian cemetery records for 15 years. She has never been allowed past the archive reading room. What is in those documents that requires this level of restriction? If the exhumed remains matched historical expectations, why would anyone object to researchers examining the measurements? The data would simply confirm what textbooks already claim. Medieval people were shorter. Nutrition was poor. Skeletal remains reflect the limitations of pre-industrial life. Simple, unless the measurements do not confirm that narrative. Unless the skeletal remains show something different. Unless the priests and physicians who documented those exhumations in the 1800s recorded findings that contradict everything we have been taught about who lived in Europe before the modern era. Then the records become sensitive. Then access requires special permission. Then the findings fall outside the scope of publication. The bones are still there, stacked in the catacombs, arranged in the ossuaries, sealed in church crypts across a dozen countries. Millions of skeletons from medieval Europe, all relocated within a single century, all documented before burial, all locked behind institutional gatekeepers who decide what researchers are allowed to see. The photographs are still in circulation. Not many, but enough. A single image from the Paris catacombs taken during the 1860s reorganization shows a wall of skulls arranged by size. The gradient is unmistakable. Bottom row, massive craniums. Middle rows, progressively smaller. Top rows, proportions matching modern humans. Someone arranged them that way deliberately. Someone photographed it, and then someone decided that photograph should not remain in public archives. I found it in a private collection in Marseille. The owner purchased it at an estate sale in 1987. The previous owner had been a municipal engineer who worked on Parisian infrastructure projects in the 1950s. He kept files, blueprints, correspondence, photographs of underground construction. This image was filed under structural documentation, not anthropology. No one was looking for it there. 3 other researchers have reported similar finds. Photographs tucked into engineering reports, medical illustrations bound into municipal health records, images that were never cataloged as anthropologically significant because they were filed as infrastructure or public works documentation. The bones were treated as construction obstacles, not research subjects. And because they were obstacles, they were documented by engineers and city planners who had no stake in historical narratives. They simply recorded what they saw. What they saw does not match the textbooks, but the textbooks control the institutions, and the institutions control the archives. There is a reason researchers hit walls, not because evidence does not exist, because access is mediated by gatekeepers who operate within frameworks that cannot accommodate contradictory data. A skeletal measurement that suggests unusual height becomes an outlier. 10 measurements become statistical noise. 100 measurements become unpublishable because they lack comparative context. And comparative context requires access to the full dataset, which requires institutional permission, which requires research proposals that fit within acceptable parameters. The circle closes perfectly. You cannot prove the pattern without access to the data. You cannot access the data without a research proposal. Your research proposal will not be approved if it challenges foundational assumptions. And if you somehow gather evidence independently, publication requires peer review by specialists employed by the same institutions that control the archives. I spoke with a historian in Prague who spent 12 years trying to publish findings on skeletal remains from St. Vitus Cathedral. She had measurements, she had photographs, she had documentation from the original 1870s exhumation. Her paper was rejected by 4 journals. The feedback was consistent, interesting data, but conclusions not supported by broader literature. She was being told her primary source evidence was invalid because it contradicted secondary sources written by people who never examined the bones themselves. That is not scholarship. That is enforcement. The bones do not lie. Measurements do not have agendas. A femur is a specific length. A skull has specific dimensions. These are physical facts. But physical facts become irrelevant when institutions decide what counts as evidence and what counts as anomaly. When 100 measurements are dismissed as outliers, the definition of normal becomes whatever fits the narrative. So where does this leave us? Millions of skeletons moved within a 50-year window. Documentation created before reburial. Archives sealed behind institutional permission structures. Independent researchers blocked at every stage. Findings that contradict established history categorized as unpublishable. And photographs tucked into engineering files because nobody thought to look there. The evidence exists. It has always existed. It was documented by priests, physicians, and municipal workers who had no reason to fabricate data. They measured what they exhumed. They recorded what they saw. And then their findings were filed in places where historians would not think to search, or sealed in archives where access requires permissions almost never granted. You can still visit the ossuaries. The bones are arranged in plain sight. millions of them, stacked floor to ceiling in Paris, Rome, Vienna, Prague. You can walk through the catacombs and see the walls yourself. You can examine the skulls on display and notice what I noticed: the size variations, the proportions that do not match modern skeletal atlases, the arrangements that suggest someone saw the same thing and documented it before sealing everything away. But you cannot access the measurements. You cannot compare what you observe to what was recorded, because the records are sensitive, because the findings require special permission, because research that questions foundational narratives does not fit within acceptable frameworks. The bones remember, the photographs preserve, the measurements exist, and somewhere in a Vatican archive or a Parisian municipal basement or a Prague ecclesiastical library, a ledger sits on a shelf recording exactly what was found when they exhumed medieval Europe. Someone knows. The question is whether anyone will be allowed to prove it before the last researchers who remember stop asking. The ledgers exist in buildings you can visit. The bones sit in crypts you can tour. The photographs survive in collections nobody catalogs. Every piece of physical evidence remains intact. What disappeared was not the proof, but the permission to examine it. And that tells you everything about what those priests found when they moved 100,000 skeletons and decided the measurements were worth more protection than the dead themselves.